For the first time this week, we're able to sit down with California Congressman Doug LaMalfa. He represents a district in Northern California, including Siskiyou County. Thanks very much for being with us, Congressman.
Appreciate it. Glad to be on with you.
So it looks like you're home and safe. Can you describe what your week's been like?
Well, certainly at the beginning of the week, we got sworn in for the 117th Congress on Sunday, and the build up towards what everybody's been watching for was on Wednesday, the counting of the electors in the House of Representatives, a joint session with the Senate, as you know. So as we know, there's much that's been contested about the election, a lot of questions surrounding how some of the states, basically it came down to 6 states that were going to be contested with the way they ran their elections. 4 of those states were in that Texas lawsuit you've heard about in the past too. And basically it comes down to were the elections conducted properly in those states. And so the contention is that the laws that were changed weren't really changed constitutionally, but done by a stroke of a pen by a governor, a secretary of state, or an election commission, and illegally done so in order to accommodate mailing every single address a ballot that has ever been registered before. That's what that boiled down to. So when it came time to certify the results in the House of Representatives, there were 6 states that were being contested on that Wednesday.
Well, Congressman, haven't those questions been addressed in courts in the jurisdictions where they were applicable, and haven't those all been rejected?
Well, to the satisfaction of tens of millions of voters, no, and to many of the members of the House who the courts in the vast majority of these cases have taken them out due to technical issues, or standing is one of the terms you hear, or like that. So that you don't have. There wasn't enough time in order to present the case. The case really did not get to be presented that well in a court hearing. So ultimately, it's Congress's responsibility to certify presidential elections anyway. So this is kind of the last stand in order to ask those questions about that in a public forum, because many of us members were not satisfied with what had happened earlier with court decisions and state legislatures. Now, just a few days before this happened, the state legislature started petitioning us to put the brakes on it, to delay the certification from the 6th for an extra 10 days. Senator Ted Cruz proposed that over on the Senate side, which would have been able to give a bipartisan commission plus 5 members of the Supreme Court an opportunity to sit down at our level and talk all these allegations through, talk all the pieces through, toss out what's, smoke and mirrors, and look at the things that were real on that, and decide how big was the problem and what should be done about it, perhaps. So that proposal didn't make it either. So obviously the result finally at the end of the day on Wednesday, which got into Thursday, was the electors stood as the numbers that were originally, purported.
Are you aware of any proof of votes being altered or any fraud in any of those states where you were contesting the results, or are you strictly concerned about the way in which the laws were addressed?
My major concern is the way the laws were addressed. You hear other things about Dominion machines. You see testimony that was done in, I believe, Michigan hearings. And so, those are allegations that haven't been proven like you would prove a case in the court of law, for example. But there are enough there. There's enough, there's hundreds of affidavits signed by people that I think they certainly deserve to have the time to present that. Those affidavits are sworn, and so that they're criminal prosecutable if indeed they're lying about this. So it just brings up enough questions, and certainly in the minds of what's the losing side. Was this fair? Was it a clean election? And just the chaos that was put in place within the last couple of months before the election, deciding to have an entire country take on the system of a mail-in ballot that had never been done before in most of those states. We've done absentees. We're talking about a completely different thing. Absentees and those types of votes, but entire states and not cleaning up the voter file. So we'd have so much confusion and chaos in the way the voting. It's still not even done in one New York district right now because it wasn't done soundly. And so that's really embarrassing for a country that has all the high tech and availability to do things cleanly and well. So that's really what the contention is. And so obviously we had, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, but with the way things broke out on Wednesday, we were in the middle of the debate when people started attacking the Capitol. And that was a very hairy moment in of itself.
Can you describe what that event was like for you? Where were you, and how were you able to get yourself and your staff to safety?
Yeah, thank you for that. We were in the House chamber, that we were proceeding through the process. We were in the A states, and Arizona was up, and that was one of the ones being contested. It had a House member contest as well as a Senate member object, and that's what it takes, is one from each House in order to then kick into a 2-hour debate. And that debate was underway. And so it only ended up Arizona and Pennsylvania were the two states that had a senator that objected as well. So those two debates were held. But during the Arizona debate, we got notice that the Capitol had been breached on the first floor, it turns out to be. And they asked us to stop the process and hold for a while in the Senate chamber. So the staff that was working in the room there and peripherally to the Senate chamber were all asked to go into one spot and kind of wait out to see how bad this was going to be. Not long after that, they started asking us to leave the chamber and go to a secure location away from there. And as we're going out, we could hear the banging on the main back door of the chamber that would face the desk as you come in, like the president or other heads of state, when they're invited to speak to the House, they come in through that doorway. That's the one where we could hear them beating on that door and breaking the glass out. Now, at one point, someone shouted out, "Shots fired." I reviewed the tape, and I actually had my own. I turned my camera on while I was waiting to get out of the room, because there was quite a crowd trying to crowd through the doors there, and it didn't sound to me like actual shots when I analyzed that. It sounded more a rhythm of somebody banging on it with a stick or some other blunt object to try and break the glass out and get inside. You might have seen still.
Did you at any time fear for your safety?
Not immediately. Obviously, it's a great level of concern, but we were following the directions that the Capitol Police and others were telling us to do. It makes their job easier, and of course, they want to keep everybody involved in the room safe, the members, the staff, and all. So I felt pretty secure in the process the whole time as they herded us out of the chamber into downstairs and into the bowels of the Capitol to where they ultimately took us.
Were you surprised at the lack of preparedness by the Capitol Police and how easy it was for the demonstrators to not only breach the Capitol but get so close to you and other members of Congress?
Yes and no, because if you have a large enough mob, unless you have just flat out have the National Guard there, I'm not completely surprised, because we've seen that in the mayhem that went on in many cities around America during the summer and fall, and there wasn't the police force there that could put it down in Portland and Seattle and Milwaukee and wherever else, and so we saw in Seattle, they held on to those blocks downtown for weeks. And that might have been also dithering by elected officials on how to handle it. But what it boils down to is that unless you want to have the National Guard everywhere around every building, that it's going to be a challenge. So I'm not going to get in line to place a lot of blame on the good job the Capitol Hill Police normally does. They have a tough deal going because they have an image also, and they can't just start pulling M4 machine guns out and start, shooting and things like that. There has to be a decorum to that. So they have a tough deal, and I think the calls to make them resign and such, I don't know. I think they need to have their day to at least talk about what they were allowed to do. Sometimes they're told to stand down. Sometimes they're told to do things.
Were you aware of an order? Were you aware of an order at any level to have the Capitol Police stand down?
I've only heard rumor of that so far, and I'm not. I don't want to deal in that so much as just when this all comes out, and this is going to take time to hear. There was a shooting of a person in the Capitol there by the police, and so people are wondering, why did this person get shot? So I would rather wait for the report, an objective look at what has happened here. But what this points out is that we're going to have a much tighter security around that building and probably many others, maybe the Supreme Court and others, to ensure that we can function. Because after this happened, several members were saying, well, they were going to change their vote and change what they're going to do about having the hearing to begin with, about having this discussion. And so what does that mean? That means the mob has won in us not being able to do our constitutional business, and that's wrong.
But the mob wanted you to contest those, if I may speak for the mob in this instance. The mob, in fact, wanted you to delay and or not certify those electors. So wouldn't the...
Well, we have to figure out who the mob is.
So now, are you of the belief that it was not Trump supporters who were in that mob?
We don't know yet. You know, again, I don't want to be too speculative on who they are. It seems they've identified that some that are seen in Antifa rallies. I'm sure there was some that were pro-Trump that went in the building too. Who broke what? Who started what? We don't know yet. But if those that are wanting us in Congress to delay the process, they didn't get their wish on that. That was a wrong way to do it, because it did cut short the debate, and it cut short, excuse me, the whole process of contesting or talking about contesting those various states. So it wouldn't have helped that way. So the disruption, it doesn't matter what side or what group it is, the disruption was wrong, because we are a nation of laws and of order, and an orderly fashion of executing them and the process by we do government. You know, so that's basically cheating that process for all law-abiding citizens when that happened.
Congressman LaMalfa, we appreciate your time today. Glad you and your staff members are home and safe, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.